And good morning, everybody. We are live. Congratulations. You made it through the week and you made it through 2024. Shoo! Oh, my goodness. So glad that year is over. My goodness. Anyway, welcome to the Food Safety Chat Live every Friday at 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern. We live stream and do a food safety conversation for an hour. My name is Bryan Armentrout with the Food Leadership Group. And every week I get to bring on an amazing food safety expert and friend of mine to talk about all things food safety. And if you attend the chat here on a regular basis, you're going to recognize the smiling face sitting opposite me. And that is Allen Sayler of I always mess this up, CFSRS Consulting. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing great. Happy New Year to you. Happy New Year to everybody on the call. And looking forward to 2025 because I do not want to repeat 2024.
No, 2025 is going to be a gangbuster for sure. So if you're new to the chat, everybody, one of our traditions here on the chat is we love to put in where you are at in the world. I am in Loveland, Colorado, where Alan, we have a foggy morning here, which is kind of odd. Yeah.
We have got true winter here. We're down to 26 degrees and don't expect to see much higher. We're just south of Washington, D.C., about 30 miles. And if the weatherman knows what they're talking about, we might actually get snow later this week.
Wow. So today is going to be, I think, the nicest day of the week here. And it's going to be close to 50 degrees here today. So that's not too shabby. I'll take it. No snow on the ground. I haven't had to shovel at all so far this year. So that's a win. Happy New Year from Dallas. Happy New Year. So hopefully everybody had a fantastic New Year and all the fun activities. This is always kind of the hard part, right? Is shifting those gears, right, Alan, from the holidays and getting through all of that and all the different activities, and now shifting gears back into work, which for most people is going to start up fast and heavy on Monday for sure.
I agree. And, in the food industry, which is our constituency, sometimes we don't get to shift. There is no downshifting and upshifting. There is simply, you struggle through the holidays. There are a few companies that do shut down and give their employees that well-deserved break. Others, certainly the dairy industry, and others that don't have that luxury, maybe dealing with more fresh types of products. You just find a way to fill the gaps. And I know you and I, we really don't shut down either. So for those of you that didn't get to shut down, but have time to join us today, congratulations, and certainly have all the respect in the world.
So Alan and I have been involved in the dairy industry for a few years, and we know very well that cows don't care. They don't care. It's Christmas Day. That milking's got to happen. Elena, speaking of superstars, Elena, welcome. Thank you for joining us here. Love following her on LinkedIn and all the fun activities she's doing. And thank you to her, because I just saw on LinkedIn this morning that, so you can see here in the background, my book, she has a book club, Alan. And so she gave away a copy of my book to a member of the book club, Tasia, who is another regular member here on the chat. So very nice of her to do that. I'm glad I'm putting some value out there for people. Glad that, hopefully, as the saying goes, right, Alan, is if people can learn from my mistakes, good. I'm glad to help.
Well, I just hope that there'll be many more, because the stories are endless, I'm sure.
Well, I hope many more mistakes. I hope not.
Well, I'm talking about lessons learned, not necessarily by your mistakes, but by others.
Hi, Cheryl. Happy New Year to you. Good to see you. So here we go, guys. Our first sip of beverage of the new year. So please join us. Cheers. Alan, you're going to live to be 100. You're so healthy.
We're trying. My father's only 95.
And that is a huge part of longevity, right? Is that genetic element. So it'll be very interesting in the future to see if they're able to figure out why that is. That people who live to a long life tend to have other family members who do that as well. So that'll be interesting to see how that happens. Oh, Elena, hoping for another book. Writing a book is a endeavor. Oh my goodness. And so when I wrote my book, I was still working. I was vice president of quality at Boulder Brands. And so I would get up at 4 a.m. before work, and I would write for an hour every day. And that's a big part of writing a book. So I had my outline in a big chunk, and there's a course I took. And if anybody wants to know, please send me an email. I'll refer you back to the course I took. They said the biggest lesson when you're writing something like this is write. Don't edit. Don't double. Just go through your outline and say, okay, today I'm going to write about this topic, and write for an hour. And that's the biggest challenge, is just setting up that discipline.
Interesting.
So 2025, Allen, the torture continues. So are you ready?
Oh, definitely.
Are you ready?
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
Okay, guys, here is the dad joke. Allen, what do you call a cow with no legs?
What do you call a cow with no legs? I don't know, Brian.
Ground beef.
Oh boy. Oh, yes.
Oh man. Oh, there's something, I think I called this out last week as well too, but I've added this to my little shrine back here. So I have a card here now that says, "You are a badass." And Corey Muse from Muse Safety Solutions sent that to me. It's a Christmas card. Very nice of her. Of course, next to that you see here. So this is the "Get the F out of FDA" t-shirt. Bill Marler sent me that. And of course, I got an E. coli here. And then this guy over here, I've got a phage. And over here, of course, this is for the Chinese year. We're currently in the year of the dragon. On January 23rd, it changes to the snake. So look, I'm looking for utterly stuck. Oh my goodness. Wah, wah, wah. Good one, Lena. So as with most people who do podcasts and live streams, and there's a lot of good ones out there, Don't Eat Poop, for example, and other ones. Part of this is doing a reflection on 2025, going into 2025, what we learned in 2024, and really going back and looking at some of those highlights. But we're going to do a little bit of a twist with this here today. And what we're going to do is highlight some of the things that caught our attention, things that were like, oh my God, what, type situations. But I think the big focus here, and we have 2 pages of notes, guys, so we got a ton of stuff to go through today, is how do you apply this to 2025? And this is why I'm so happy I have you on the show for this, Allen, because you're very good at that contemplative reflection relative to this. So take notes, guys, because I am sure that Allen is going to have some very good nuggets here for you today. So hot topics. Here we go. The big one for me, Allen, frickin' enoki mushrooms. Oh my God. How many listeria issues did I post in locals this year for recalls for listeria in enoki mushrooms? And originally what I would see was overseas suppliers. You see Chinese packaging and the recalls, and you see this almost every other week you would see a recall for these mushrooms. And then I started seeing them for domestic brands as well. At this point, I have no idea why, what it is inherent in the growing of enoki, other than the only thing I can think of is, when you see the enoki right there, these big, tall, spindly mushrooms with small caps, lots of nooks and crannies in between those stems. Maybe it's just really hard to clean them. I don't know. Any thoughts?
Well, I've got a thought that it is not just mushroom related, but it is related to anything that is fresh. Anything that is growing based on the ground as a source of nutrients. And most of our vegetables are that. Now, a lot of our vegetables are then cooked, canned, frozen, whatever. And so therefore we know that even if they are contaminated with listeria, which frankly they probably are, the listeria is inactivated. Listeria doesn't provide, there's no toxins associated with it. So you don't need to worry about that as a residual. So it is not surprising. And this is going to continue until we find, and this is a challenge for all of us, until we find a way, can we wash sufficiently? Maybe for some types of vegetables that don't have, as you said, the nooks and crannies, maybe we can find a washing solution that will remove all the biofilms, the bacterial biofilms, the listeria, and even the non-pathogenic types of things. And we do have some that seem to work, but we don't get any consistency. And part of the consistency may not be the chemistry. It may not be the surface. It may be the people. So it always comes back down to people, even though, we have these various outbreaks. It's a people issue, and we can move on. But I'll be honest with you that it's just going to be a risk we're going to have to live with. If you're eating something that is raw, whether it's raw cheese, raw dairy products, raw vegetables, raw mushrooms, there will be a small percentage that will have pathogens in them. And whether you believe in the adage or not about 100 colony forming units or less for a healthy adult is viable, you can manage that. Or whether you don't believe in it, I don't know. But I will say that our population is becoming the percentage of people with immune compromised situations, diseases, whether it's temporary or whether it is something long term, is increasing. So, we really have to come up with a better solution. And I know I was involved in one recall that was involved with fresh fruits and vegetables, and FDA has no clue the realities of this product in the marketplace, the demand by consumers, and what FDA in this particular case expected of the processor. I mean, it was ludicrous. It was like, well, just go to the grocery store because that's where they come from. No, they don't. I thought everybody knew that, but maybe that's not true.
Well, and part of this too, based on public perception, other food safety tools that are potentially available to neutralize these threats are unavailable to us. Hey, let's irradiate this. Oh, no, right? So those type of and other things are being taken off the table. So using gases, so bromination or things of this nature to get in there with nope, those are all being phased out. So our tool bag is getting smaller and smaller, making the challenge greater. And that segues into the next one, which I'm sure is on everybody's mind as well. And as we're going through this list, guys, if there's things that we've missed, throw them in the comments, and we'll give our 2 cents on those too. Of course, the next big thing that caught everybody's attention, a lot of this is recency as well too. This is human nature. Is the Taylor Farms? People call it the McDonald's recall, but it's really the Supplier recall, right? So the onion recall, right? So any thoughts around that, Alan?
Well, it was inevitable, and it gets back to this fresh fruits and vegetables whole premise is that you would think McDonald's, as advanced in their thinking as they are in food safety, and we've got outstanding people that are watching for these things, would have come to a conclusion some time ago that we do not put fresh anything onto any of our foods. Now they're selling salads, and so they apparently have figured out how to mitigate that risk. But the challenge is that it is inevitable if you're serving or to the public a fresh something, whether it's fresh onions on a burger, and well, the burger's kind of warm, and maybe the onions are warmed up on the grill temporarily, but they are not sauteed in any way that's going to do anything to the listeria. So it's inevitable. So, okay, so let's acknowledge we'll just start sauteing or doing something special with the onions. Well, what about the salads? And McDonald's isn't the only one. Every restaurant almost in the world, certainly in the United States, has fresh salad as one of their options. And the fact we don't have more outbreaks from that is actually surprising. Not that we have any, it's surprising. So what is being done? There are obviously companies doing things, and these may be trade secrets, to ensure that there is safety here. So onion, yes, but it's actually a segue into the bigger discussion about fresh fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and Dr. Detweiler has talked about this on the show as well. He's been looking at and has toured different technologies for indoor hydroponic growth processes that in themselves can be risky, but there's different companies that have developed systems to enhance food safety. So I'm sure there's gonna be more coming on that in the year to come. The next one for me, and this is kind of one of those ones that flies under the radar, and I don't know why. And if you have allergens or people with allergens, this is a company, in my opinion, that you should be avoiding, Alan, and that's Frito-Lay. They do not know how to handle. I mean, I really, you hate calling out companies like this and criticizing because it's very easy to do, and to throw stones. But my goodness, do they have a lot of recalls? They had another one on December 18th for milk allergen and potato chips. Last year, they had the one in 2024. In 2023, Alan, they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 recalls for allergens in 2023 in their products. And when you look at these recalls on FDA, these are from multiple plants. These aren't all coming from the same plant, which implies to me that's a system problem that they have within their company to be able to do this.
Exactly. And, in fairness, is it their suppliers? So it's really not Frito-Lay's fault. It's the supplier's fault. Well, that's right. We're supposed to manage our suppliers.
Yeah.
So I guess that is a responsibility of Frito-Lay. And well, maybe we're doing least cost formulations where we change our formulations and we do it across the board, across all of our plants that make a particular product. And as we do least cost formulations, we're switching back to a formula maybe we hadn't used in a year. We have to change suppliers because the supplier we got one of the ingredients from is no longer available. And so is there any due diligence in supplier management? Now, maybe it isn't supplier management. Maybe it's just human error. Maybe it's training of employees. It would be nice to know what is the root cause. And even though there is a pattern here, the root cause could be the same, which is even more damaging to Frito-Lay, or it could be different. And frankly, does it matter? It may be the fact that the root causes are different doesn't matter. It may be evidence of a foundational food safety problem in the organization.
Yeah. Well, and I think a key piece of evidence here on this, Alan, is for these allergen recalls, they've had milk, soy, wheat. They're kind of hitting them all. Okay? So those all imply to me flavorings, right? So some type of a carrier within their changeover, who knows? But that's part of the problem is we don't know, right? What's going on. So that forces you then, if you have a problem with allergens, to completely avoid that because you can't trust their systems. And food safety is built on trust. And so if you can't do that, you're kind of in a bad spot.
Maybe they just have a bad printer that doesn't print the bags properly or the labels properly. I think the answer is highly unlikely. It has happened, but this is, I think, a systemic problem within the organization. For an organization like this not to have addressed it, and it seems to continue to happen, that organization is going to start having issues, and those issues are going to be widespread.
Yep. Yeah. And as Teja very astutely says here, right? The root cause is not to find the root cause. Absolutely. So clearly they don't have it. So in the meantime,
Well said.
booties, I think would probably be a better option. So next big thing that happened last year was all of the upheaval with FDA and their reorganizations and creating a new division and all of the changes associated with that. And as an insider with the extensive experience in FDA, what are your thoughts around what's been going on with FDA, Alan?
Well, I do like the premise and theory of the reorganization. I think that putting the policy and food people, when I was there, you'd write policy and then the field would decide whether they wanted to carry it out, what was priorities. It was not the same priorities as headquarters with their policies, because there were little fiefdoms or kingdoms at the regional and district levels in FDA. And there was no way for the FDA headquarters policy people to have any real impact. Now, I'm not saying there wasn't coordination, there wasn't effort to work together. There was, but it really diminished the ability of FDA to pivot quickly, because the field people, frankly, liked the routine. I can remember one field person who got up in a meeting, and this was a large private meeting of FDA field people, and said, "I don't like change. I don't want change. Don't ever make me have to change." And yet the policies, and you have to be able to change. And as new technologies and new challenges come, you have to be able to pivot to address them. So I think the reorganization is good. The difficulty is with any reorganization, is it really going to be effective, and how is it going to work out? And it comes down to people and management. And one of the foundation problems that FDA has had for a long time is is their management, and it's usually in the middle management. Senior management, they've had some really good and some not so really good senior management, but their problem is in many cases the professional middle managers. And so we will see how the policy people and the field people play. Can they play in the same sandbox without stealing each other's toys and hitting each other with those toys? We will see. I think it will eventually work out. But I wish that was the only challenge facing FDA, and we're going to be talking about another one in 2025. So I'll hold off there. But for now, I think it was the right thing to do. It looks on paper like it should be successful and improve the effectiveness of FDA. We'll see.
Yep. So good luck to FDA for sure.
Yep.
Another big one, and this has been something recently that caught my eye, and I've done some webinars on this as well, is a lot of people are unaware that FDA has a training manual for their field personnel, right? The Investigation Operations Manual, the IOM. It used to be called the Inspection Operation Manual, and then they changed it a few years ago. And it used to be, Alan, this thing would be updated every 5-10 years, maybe or so. They're updating this puppy every year now, and they are aggressively going in there and changing their tactics. And in particular, environmental monitoring, chapter 4, how they approach these. And that is a topic in and of itself that we don't have time to get into today. But FDA is being very open relative to the IOM and how they're expecting their field agents to operate when they're going into your plants. And if you don't understand what they're doing, you're at a great disadvantage.
I'm glad you brought that up, because there's a lot of people that aren't even aware of this IOM. And I think that we need on our bookshelves, and referring to it frankly, frequently, the IOM. You have got the the PCQI manual that was recently updated. Not a lot of changes, but it was updated by the FSPCA, which is not an animal rights group, but it's the Food Safety Alliance that FDA set up. But more importantly, one of the things that I don't think people are paying attention to is the FSMA manual with its extensive chapters. And FDA, back in 2015, not saying that the PCQI manual is introductory. Anybody that reads that and thinks they have now got the keys to the kingdom is sadly mistaken. What you need is the chapters, the FSMA chapters that FDA is releasing. In 2015, they were supposed to release about one every couple of months, and we're probably on chapter 4 or 5. They release a few. They're not in sequence, but please go back in and look at those. Are the keys to the kingdom. They have lots of detail, lots of good information. And I know that we probably don't have the website address or the hot link to get to that, but I'd suggest that be posted, because I think people think the PCQI manual and these chapters, these FSMA chapters, well, they're the same thing. And they are not. They are much more extensive. And so with that and the IOM, and I really think that FDA is in a mode right now of take no prisoners. So if you think that you can negotiate with FDA if you have a food safety problem, think again. And if you think you can bring an attorney in and that will solve your problems, it is very likely to complicate your problems. And I have a lot of respect. There are times when attorneys are necessary. But please understand, 2025 will be a take no prisoners year.
Yes, absolutely. So we have a question here. Let's see if I can answer this for Miss Elena. So she wants to know, where do you get the FSMA manual? So with the FSMA manual, so the actual, well, so there's, so do you mean, does she mean the PCQI manual?
Well, no, I think it's what I'm saying. I gave it a name that it doesn't actually have. The FSMA manual that I used as a naming convention are actually the extensive chapters that FDA has released that are much more detailed. They, in some ways, follow the chapter sequence of the PCQI manual. But let's say that there's a chapter in PCQI on recalls, and there is. And you read that, and it is a good foundation intro to recalls and what you should do and root cause and those kinds of things. But if you go and get this FSMA chapter that is on recall, not the PCQI one, which is fine, it is much more detailed, much more extensive. And therefore, that's what I'm saying, Bryan. After this, let's you and I find the hot links to get so that your viewers can find these more useful. And I'm not saying that the PCQI manual in its updated form isn't useful. It's very useful, but it doesn't have the detail that what I call the FSMA manual chapters have.
Right. Yeah. So part of this is, and so I will post here at the end of the chat in the link, my locals group. I will put in there the link to the inspection operations manual, the FSPCA link to that, and then also with your assistance, Alan, we'll make sure that we get that information in there as well. So again, the locals group, free, right? And every week I post in here recalls and other information for people to keep up on. So and that's part of the challenge. We're going to talk about this a little bit in 2025. Is keeping up on all this stuff, right? If you're trying to do this on your own, and I know that from personal experiences, you do your day job during the week, and then you try and track down all the stuff on the weekends, and that can be not a lot of fun. Going into the manual a little bit here, and this was a huge topic on the chat here for us last year, is environmental monitoring. And Teja is very correctly saying here, and what we were talking about is human beings that's part of our nature, is we don't like change. And it doesn't matter if you work for FDA or a production facility or a company. Most people, right? I don't want to change. But environmental monitoring, is I think last year is one of those vanguards of things that we do need to change in our operations. Our environmental monitoring programs are awful. They are based on what we were thinking 10 to 20 years ago. And man, you need to change your environmental monitoring. That was a big lesson in 24.
I agree with you. And a couple of counterintuitive things about environmental monitoring that may be helpful to bring up here is that we like to monitor where there's high traffic because it makes most sense. That's where the contamination is going to be. And yet what seems to happen is the high traffic areas also get the high attention for cleaning. So guess where we tend not to monitor, and guess where we ultimately find some of our pathogenic friends? In the low traffic areas, in the corners. Yeah. But nobody goes back there. Nobody can hardly get behind that tank. Nobody can get around there. The only people that go back there are the maintenance people when they have to do something. Maintenance people.
Those really clean maintenance people. Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
that just were out in the warehouse taking apart and fixing a pallet jack and that clean. And we need them. Please, I have the most respect for what they do, but they also are, with many other sources, a source of contamination. So the counterintuitive point, when you are setting up environmental monitoring, and many companies do massive swabbing, but they don't vary the swabbing enough, and they do not look in low traffic areas of the processing. So in the corners, the nooks, the undersides, those are things that I think probably people hear in your blog. I'm probably speaking to the choir. But let's think about not increasing numbers, but let's being smarter about the resources we have for environmental monitoring. Let's change up and let us also be looking for things, maybe using more indicators and less specific, because the indicator tests usually are cheaper, which means I can do more of them. Now, I know I said let's not do more, but if there are some companies that, let's face it, they're doing token. Most of us are probably doing adequate numbers, but we're not monitoring in the right places. And we're probably not monitoring always for the right things. So in a wet area, should I be looking for salmonella? Well, FDA would say yes. My opinion, I wouldn't waste time in my wet areas on salmonella. I would in the dry areas. And conversely, in the dry areas, should I be looking for listeria? Not necessarily. In fact, why would I do it? FDA would tell you, you've got to look for both of them in both areas. But let's be smart about what we know about the organisms, where they're harbored, what conditions they need, and then enhance our environmental monitoring based on that.
Yep. And one final point on that is that if you have a resident strain, you have to eradicate it, because it's no longer sufficient to say, oh yeah, I have this, this persistent strain in my plant that I can't get rid of, but there's nothing in the product. No, FDA has now jumped over that hurdle and said, no, if you have a resident strain that is a specific pathogen that's a threat to the product, we now consider that product adulterated by default. And they will come down hard on you. You have to get those resident strains out of your plant, which is not easy. And there's
Are
no
you
doubt about
saying
that.
I have to do DNA testing? Jeepers.
My
In
goodness.
2025, I think the answer is how can you have an environmental program without that as part of the toolbox?
Yep, absolutely. And this is why I love having experts like Allen on the chat with me, because if you take one thing out of the chat, that little bit right there, if you missed it, go back and listen to the recording. Absolutely important. Of course, a huge one last year was sesame. Hello, sesame. Now we have this new allergen to manage. And if you're in a bakery making hamburger buns, good luck. Good luck with that.
Yeah. And you know, as challenging as another allergen is, you know, I like coconut as flavor, yet the amount of products with coconut in it has diminished substantially just to avoid the allergens. I like sesame, but it is an allergen. And so the amount of products with sesame or sesame oil, unless it is highly refined, it is going to diminish. And yet, you know, where I find one of the bigger ones that is surprising to a lot of food safety professionals is soy lecithin. Well, wait a minute, that's not an allergen, Alan. Why are you even bringing it up? And it's like, you didn't read the memo that came out about 8 years ago from FDA. Maybe it was 6. My memory is always a little dim on those. So allergens, when you look at recalls, they still are the driving force. And you brought it up with Frito-Lay.
Yeah, absolutely. So of course, last year, a huge topic, and this is evolving, and Austin, who's in the chat, I work with Austin on this, is food safety culture, this term, food safety culture. What does it mean? We're still trying to figure that out. And my position on this is it depends, right? It's this culmination of how you're doing things as a company, right? So we don't want to dive too deeply into this topic, but I want to get your feedback on this, Alan, is if you go into a company and food safety culture is pinned on the quality manager as you need to develop food safety culture, you're done, right? You're not going to succeed.
Yeah, and food safety culture, the term has been bantied around, and yet how do I improve it? How do I address it? What do I do? This is about people, and so do we set up? We should really be talking about a management system to set employees up for success. Okay, if you set them up for success, what does that success mean? Well, in the auto industry, it's different. If you're selling cars, it's different. If you are making food, it is different. But the management systems, and I think you were segueing into this, is that the management of a food processing facility has got to set the employees up for success by allowing the quality assurance people and setting up criteria. And you know, when you set up criteria for success, you also establish what is the line that you cross and you fail.
Yeah.
Not everybody should be doing blogs like Bryan, you do so aptly. Not everybody should be a policeman. Not everybody should be working in a food processing plant. And therefore, you have to look at incentivizing and providing opportunities for success. And you also have to understand there are some people that don't respond because they don't believe. They are not believers in the fact that by what I am doing on a daily basis has any impact on food safety. So I'm going to do it the same way I've done it before. And we're going to get to one of the items here in a little bit where I think that is exactly what happened. Is we had a sense that we have been successfully running product through this facility for years and years. And so why should we change? And when you as a middle manager come in and try to make changes without upper management really behind you, it's not going to work. So food safety culture is more about setting a management system in place that rewards those that will support and come up with new ideas, new approaches to improve food safety, and also has a system for identifying those that don't.
No, well said. And I think you made a very good point in there, which is we need to move from identifying what food safety culture is not to what is food safety culture. And to your point, how do we measure that? And key to that is people, right? The people process of this. And I think that's probably why in what we do, we're trying to figure this out still because we're technical people and we want to create a policy and write a document. And that may not be the answer. So, next topic, and this is a subcomponent of FSMA as well, which is foreign supplier verification. And I see lots of companies last year. This is the number one thing that FDA writes companies up for is failure to comply with FSVP. Most companies don't understand this, and if you're not looking at this as a component of your supplier verification program, a lot of people got bit by that last year, didn't they?
They did. And I think it is not so much, were you on the list, so to speak? Did you
Mhm.
sign up? But how did you put a program together? Okay, I signed up. I'm done. I'm done. I am an FSVP. I'm an importer right now. And
Okay.
to write a program it's like writing a comprehensive FSMA-based preventive control food safety program. It is extensive, and there are ongoing requirements. The FSVP importer is required to, at some point, test the imported products for certain likely hazards. Well, wait a minute. How do I know what those hazards are? I'm just an importer. Because
Uh,
you have to have an understanding of the food to identify the hazards, whether chemical, physical, or biological, and you have to evaluate them. Does the FDA regulation say how frequently? No. What I advise my clients is you better have something on record once a year where you've evaluated what are the likely hazards and you've tested for them. You've
yeah.
and is it statistically valid? No. And I will tell you right now, statistic validity in our business is not reality. You will hear that espoused by people, and it's not reality. But FDA says you at least have to have a token program where you evaluate the product. I think that is where a lot of people are going, are getting excited, is that they are not checking their product. They have no idea what the likely hazards might be for food that they're importing because I'm an importer. I know all the regulations and the laws, and I know the customs, and private customs people, and I'm in with them, but I don't know much about food safety. That's
Yeah.
where we're falling short.
Right. And so remember, FDA has easy access for auditing under FSVP. They have the Customs and Border Protection imports. And all they have to do is have some agents sit down in San Diego at the import division and say, here's a list of importation numbers. Here's the contact numbers. Call them up and do a phone audit. That's all they have to do, right? They don't even have to come to your facility. And if that information is wrong, if the designated importer is incorrect, ooh, here comes your 483. Thank you very much. And I've had clients who have had that happen to them, and it's been a big wake up. So don't forget FSVP. Of course, the biggest issue of 2024 in my mind, Alan, was Boar's Head. Oh my goodness. And that post that Bill Marler put up with the widow of the gentleman who died in that recall and the heartbreak and not having Christmas with her husband any longer because he died from this, just horrendous, absolutely horrendous. I I think this is gonna be one of those ones that sticks around like Jack in the Box and Odwalla, and anybody who's involved with food safety. This Boar's Head issue is not going away, and people are going to remember this for a long time.
I can't agree with you enough. We actually had a lady at church that became ill, and she was older, not
Mhm.
elderly, but she was in perfect health, and she just about didn't make it. And there's no doubt that it was from consuming Boar's Head product. What is so sad is all the indicators of substantial, not a few problems, substantial problems were there, and they were. Some people say they were missed. I don't think they were missed. They were just nothing was ever done to address them.
Yeah.
And as you had mentioned to me, one of the younger new hires tried to make some impact in that facility, and there was no support. And without knowing, I think I am right in saying that this was a facility that was built greenfield a number of years ago, state of the art, Everybody in the area was hired. They got a stable workforce, and that stable workforce was doing cutting edge things 20 years ago, and they were doing, last year the same thing they were doing 20 years ago, probably with the same equipment in the same process, except they were probably running twice as much product through the facilities they were before, and the facility was not set up, so therefore were they getting clean? Were they, and meat companies and meat plants are notorious for using equipment that is very difficult to clean. In many food sectors, you do not hear about plants shutting down for deep cleaning because they are cleaned on a regular basis in an adequate way. In the meat industry, it's acceptable to shut down to do deep cleaning. If we could accomplish something in 2025, it would be to convince the meat sector to start demanding that the equipment makers give them equipment that can be cleaned without having to disassemble the entire facility to do so. And so, there's lots of lessons to be learned. But what is so sad is our profession really failed because, and it was the regulatory side of our profession as well as the private side, because the findings after the recall and the illness outbreak, the findings were shocking, absolutely shocking. And it wasn't like, I suspect they probably had cleaned up by the time that some of this happened. And yet it was still shocking what they found there. So, and is this going on in other facilities, legacy facilities? I think sadly, yes. And this goes back to food safety culture. I think it was such an inherent group of people that without senior management bringing, setting them up for success, the people that wanted to make changes, short of firing, 80 to 90% of the staff and starting over, I don't know what they could do. And they certainly didn't make the effort. There was no effort to try and to not be able to have seen these problems. It was just a matter of time. And we can give you example after example over the years of this same process. You may be aware of this developing, I hope not in your facilities, but it's going to happen again, and it shouldn't. So where are we making progress? We've got the new tools, Bryan. We've got new abilities, new knowledge. We've got bright young people out there, and it doesn't seem like we're making any progress.
Yeah.
So what does that mean for 2025?
Same old, same old. I mean, so part of this is, and the way I look at this is my guess is if you went in a Wayback Machine with Mr. Peabody, there's a reference for the older people out there, and you went and talked to the senior leadership at Boars Head a year ago and asked them if they were doing okay and if they were producing safe food, they would say, no, we're fine. We're fine. Right. So that's part of the issue, right? Is we need to be able to educate up and make sure that senior leadership understands the problems, and making sure, as Austin talks about, having a speak up culture so that the people who are at the plants can raise their hand when there's a problem and say, hey, got a problem here, boss, without fear of repercussion and knowing that they're safe. Because if you're not feeling safe in your job, what do people do? They shut up and they just go with the flow. And this is the result we get. So moving on, right? Oh boy, we're close on time here. So of course, in 2025, we'll hit these very quickly because I want to definitely get to key lessons on what we're talking about here today. Is all the changes with RFK Jr., what's coming up with the new administration, huge, right? So if you're a food company and you have products with artificial sweeteners or high fructose corn syrup or red dyes or other artificial colors within your products, you're doing this right now, Alan. Ooh, right? The R&D guys are sweating bullets right now, waiting to see what's going to happen on this front.
Well, let us put a little wager down as to whether RFK Jr. gets confirmed. And I would like to know what everybody else thinks, because I don't think any of us have any certainty about or inside knowledge whether he'll get confirmed. My wager is I'll bet you a bottle of kefir, because I don't drink coffee, that he will be confirmed. And so if I'm right, now I don't know what your thought is.
I agree. I think he's going to be confirmed. I think public support is behind him. And what do politicians do? They follow public support. And yeah, I'd be curious too to see what people here in our group think about that as well. But I would say there's probably 85% chance that he is going to be confirmed. If he can survive killing a bear and dumping it in the park, I think he can get past anything. Segueing in with that, then of course is Doge, right? Oh man, there's going to be a ton of activity in that. And this gets back to your reference points earlier on, this is with any company or the government, right? And we're starting to see, as citizens of the U.S., it's not the executive level in regulatory agencies or the government that are necessarily the problem. It's the unappointed people below that, and the ones who have the power behind the scenes who say, "I'm not doing that." Right? There was another former FDA official that I know that we were chatting one time, and she had told me that whenever new leadership comes in at FDA, part of the attitude is, and you see this in manufacturing too, is, all right, we'll wait this out. This person's not going to be around here very long. They're going to get frustrated and leave, and then things will be back to normal. So we'll let them prance around their little programs, and then we'll go back to normal. I with Doge, I don't know. What do you think? I don't think it's going to happen this time.
No. And, some of the public pronouncements by RFK Jr. about eliminating certain parts of FDA could come to pass. So the industry, on the one hand, we are the victims. We will be the victims in some cases. In other cases, we may have to be advocates to support our regulatory brethren who, the next week could be asking us to do a recall or encouraging us to do a recall. So it's an interesting dance that we're going to see in 2025, where we are going to be, we're going to have to be very nimble, very quick to pivot. And so I was doing an interview for a news story, and I don't get that magazine, so I never read it actually. But the point I made was, once the administration people are in power, food company senior people need to meet with them as soon as they possibly can. Get on your get on their calendar. If RFK Jr. is confirmed, get on his calendar, get on the people that he is bringing in, get on their calendar and start talking to them so they have a real understanding of the food industry, not some of these extremist views that are probably supported and probably derived from social media without any scientific support at all. And so the key is, let's not look at him or them as enemies, but let's look at them as people we need to engage, and engage frequently, so we understand where they are going, and they might actually rely on us for some advice. But as far as Doge, my opinion, I think there are parts of FDA where if half the staff left, we wouldn't notice any difference in operation.
Yep, absolutely. So definitely, and we'll kind of bow tie this remaining group with this here so we can move on to our next piece, which is lots of regulatory activity. So Prop 65 in California, heavy metal standards are changing, right? You have the input formula standards out there as well. The potential for tariffs, right? So is it a negotiating ploy? Is it real? We don't know. But if you manufacture in Canada, again, right, those R&D guys, right, they're doing this. So enhanced traceability. My clients, and we talked about this last week, Alan, my clients are starting to get letters from retailers saying, you need to comply with enhanced traceability. We don't care that you don't make a high-risk product. We want everyone to comply with these standards. My recommendation on that, there's a GS1 document that is out there. So the system for barcodes that we all use. They have some recommendations. My guess on that is that's probably going to be the path forward. We'll see what happens on that side. The other big one here is Looper Bright, Chevron deference. And this is the law saying that, so this was the Supreme Court ruling saying in a nutshell that regulatory agencies cannot create laws by themselves. Now, part of this is that in order to challenge this, somebody has to sue. And so we're going to see what happens on that. That has massive implications for what we do in food safety. So keep your eye out for that as well. Now, key lessons moving forward, and Alan, you talked on this, and this has been kind of a theme through everything that we've been talking about here, is lessons of the past, right? We just seem to be caught in this loop, and another large recall happens, and everybody's surprised that and every year recalls are at about the same level. we're not learning lessons from the past.
No, no. If you go, FDA has got a beautiful database, and even though if you go into the recall database, it puts cosmetics and foods together, you can sift it out if you've got the time. And you go back all the way to 2018, and the statistical difference in recalls is minimal, is absolutely minimal. That is what, now almost 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And you mean we don't have anything that gives us a sense that it is reducing? You can say, well, it has from 18 and 19, it's kind of reduced. It flattened in 18, 19, then it kind of went down and it stayed in its own little path. But for all material purposes, it has not. And so we have got to be doing something different. And is AI a possibility? One of the things that is a challenge is we used to operate 50 years ago without enough data, and we used a lot of experience in flying by the seat of our pants. Now we're overwhelmed with data that doesn't many times get analyzed. I'd like your thoughts on that.
Oh yeah, we are swimming in data, but we don't have information, right? We need to be able to condense this down, and part of being a good manager is sifting through all that and getting to the key information in your facility and figuring out what are those KPIs, what are those key performance indicators that we need to have. And part of that is it's a silver lining is if you don't need that information, get rid of it. Do you really need to track that thing, right? That was started 15 years ago that the previous QA guy put in place. Does anybody actually look at it? If not, get rid of it. If you don't need it, get rid of it.
So I want to know how you evaluate risk both in the microcosm and in the macrocosm of food processing, so that you don't wait till you see the forest starting to burn down, Boar's Head, but that you have indicators ahead of time, like we do in the weather. We talked at the beginning of the call at the weather. The weathermen are not perfect, but they seem to be pretty good. Why do they know when weather systems are coming in? Well, we sometimes are completely surprised when we have a food safety problem or food safety failure. Do you have any thoughts? How can we improve that in 2025?
I think that's a great lesson, is that we need to become better at risk assessment. And as we've talked about on the chat, Alan, other industries are fantastic at this. Insurance companies, to your point, we need to think more in terms of percentages. Walmart is famous for this, where they will track to the point where the government asks them now for information. They know exactly where that hurricane is going to come on for landfall, and they understand within a certain parameter. All right, percentage-wise, 95% chance it's going to fall between Baton Rouge and Shreveport, and they will position support materials just outside of that window to rush in after that hurricane moves past. They are looking at this from a risk assessment and observational standpoint. I think that's a big problem in companies, is we assume that risk is static. It is not static. It is constantly changing, and we don't adapt to that. New suppliers, risk has gone up. New products, risk goes up. Oh, the M&A group just acquired a new division. We have a brand new product in our portfolio. Your risk just tripled within that company. We don't react to that until after the fact.
I agree. And if we could use the allusion that you made to the weather system, what are the things? Weather's got what? Humidity, pressure, temperature, wind. What do we have in the food industry that gives us a sense of trying to quantify risk in some way?
Yeah. Cortland's giving me a hard time. Hey, come on. It was off the cuff. Come on.
Well, what I'm trying to do is that Bryan is being very modest, because Bryan has developed a program, certainly it may be still under the development, that actually is a bit like predicting hurricanes, but it is predicting risk in a food safety organization. And I know this is not, but Bryan was kind enough to show me some of the peek under the tent of this program, and I think it is amazing. And we need to go into those areas. Predicting weather 50 years ago was a bit by chance, and predicting food safety problems and where they occur, we're kind of that way right now. And
Yeah.
let's get away from that. Let's start, and doing something is better than doing nothing. When they started having computer models, I was in college when they started doing computer modeling of weather, and people were laughing because they would have they'd have, snowstorms developing in Hawaii based on a model. But you know what? Today it's outstanding. So let's at least start with the snowstorms in Hawaii, which I think we can do better, by the way, in predicting risk. And I don't know if you want to say a few things about that, Bryan, or not.
No, well, thanks for bringing that up because um, it's time to jump in the pool. And in 2025, this is my big objective, is that, to your point, Alan, and thanks for bringing this up, is so I've created not an audit tool, a company risk assessment tool. And within that tool, you can then go to that company because risk is relative to company and industry. It's more than just what you're making. It's your overall risk in that company. And this ties well what we were talking about with food safety. And it's ready to launch. And so what I'm looking for right now, and I'm going to talk about this more on LinkedIn as well, but you guys are getting a sneak peek here, is I'm looking for a company to pilot with. I am looking for a food company who is cutting edge, who wants to build world-class controls and risk development within their systems and understanding internally what those are so they can fix those risks. And so that's the point that I'm at right now. What I have, this is not a one size fits all, everybody in the food industry does this. No, this is something for top tier. And so it's ready to go. And if anybody out there has ideas on companies that could be potential partners with me on this, send me a note. I'm ready.
I can say that again, and I am not a paid spokesman here because um, Bryan was kind enough to show it to me, and I was amazed. This is the risk forecasting we've needed for a long time, and I would encourage those of you listening to talk to Bryan privately about this and see if it would be something that would be worth taking up in 2025 in your company. We've got to do it. We've got to do something to change the dynamics here because we have been using new tools. We have been bringing on what I think are smarter, better trained people, and it hasn't moved the cheese. Sorry,
Yes.
for my industry. We are still having the same issues at about the same frequency. And yes, from year to year, the people that become ill or die are different, but overall, it hasn't changed much in the last few years.
Yeah. I'll make a prediction for 2025 here, Alan. If we keep doing things the way we're doing, here's the top 3 complaint categories for recalls for 2025: Salmonella and Listeria, foreign material, and allergen cross-contamination.
Absolutely.
Now, prove me wrong.
Absolutely. I think you're right. And of the 3, the one that shocks me is foreign materials. I
Yes.
just don't get it. I know that those things can happen. I know how they can happen. There is no excuse for them happening. None at all. Listeria and Salmonella, okay. Yeah, that's a big challenge. And there are really special efforts and talents needed. And allergens, I'll put that in the same category as foreign material. My opinion, there's no excuse for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And this gets back to what we were talking about with Boar's Head and the senior leadership within the company, is if you're working for a food company and they bring in a new CEO, why do they hire CEOs? The board of director, number one, they hire the CEOs. They hire the CEO to hit the financial objectives for the company, to meet the shareholder objectives, to create innovation, whatever the directives are from the board of directors. They bring in the CEO to hit those objectives. Do they care that that person is from food? No, right? I saw this all the time in my career. One of the best executives for managing a company that I worked for in the past came from Gillette, in a food company. Right? And he brought a lot of people from Gillette in with him. Fantastic people. But did they know food? Absolutely not. They did not know food. If we were making razors, fantastic. But senior leadership needs to understand food. We work in a very unique industry. Right? All of us, I don't eat my car, right? I don't chew on my razors. We produce things that go into people's body for sustenance and nutrition. And senior leadership needs to focus on that. And I think that was, if you probably get back to the root cause of what the failures happening in large food companies like this, is senior leadership does not understand that. They think that it's our job, to Cortland's point here, and the park doctor, they don't understand that it's their responsibility. They think it's our responsibility, and that's a key problem. And companies, if they're going to improve their risk, if they're going to reduce that risk within their companies, senior leadership needs to wake up, and we're the people to help them do that.
I agree. And of the senior management, COOs should be convinced that the food safety program and the amount of money that they invest in food safety and quality is an asset that increases the valuation of the company. Now, I know that's not accounting principles, but that is the reality. And companies that do not adequately invest in food safety and food quality, their asset value should be reduced. How's that to wrap things up?
Well, and I would say on that point that within large food companies that have recognizable brands, they do put that as a value on their spreadsheets, right? When they put out stock value, it's that brand recognition and value of that brand. And if you impact that, that is definitely something that we can measure. So look at those type of things. So fantastic chat, guys. Everybody, thank you. Great start to the year. Did we make it to the end of our notes? Heck no. We had 2 pages of notes here, but I think we made fantastic progress, and we're going to hit the ground running in 2025 for sure. So Allen, as usual, and I always love having you on because it's just you're a wealth of information, and I know that everybody here benefits that. And of course, again, fantastic chat here, guys. Appreciate it. And again, if you're interested in what I'm working on with the food safety protection policy, and if it can help your company, that's my email right here. Reach out to me. You're going to see something that nobody else is doing. And I'm very excited about this. And I appreciate, Allen, your support in this and your mentorship as well. I'm very excited for that. So with that, guys, we're going to close out our chat here for this week. And of course, next week, as we go into 2025, we'll be back here next Friday at the same time, 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern, where I'll bring on another amazing expert like Allen. Next week, we have a CEO on the show. I've been trying to get a CEO on the show forever. So guess what we're going to be talking about next week? So it's going to be a fantastic chat. So everybody join us here on LinkedIn or YouTube for the next chat. In the meantime, have a great weekend. Enjoy yourself. And we'll see you back here. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Bryan. Take care.